I want to start this video by making it very clear that I first had to understand the psychology of both whites and blacks in this country to be able to understand what it was I was going through and experiencing even since a young age. I want to say that again. I want to start this video off by saying I had to first understand the psychology of both whites and blacks in this country for me to be able to come to an understanding of what it was I was going through, even at a young age, involving the sport of basketball. If it hadn't been for that, if I hadn't come to that understanding within myself over the years, I wouldn't be able to speak about it right now. I wouldn't be able to talk about it or tell the story. I wouldn't be able to reflect and consciously remember, everything in order to be able to hopefully help someone else to be able to avoid certain things, and not just from a racial standpoint or from you know uh, any type of political standpoint, but also from an economic standpoint, a financial standpoint, a best decision for your future standpoint. You know, knowing when simply. When my parents split and we moved upstate, we moved to a town where it was almost nothing but white people. So, being the way that I was raised, being having the parents that I had that raised me, to not necessarily see color, but to treat everyone equally and treat everyone the way you want to be treated and respect everyone and have love for everyone. It was interesting to see how you go from being around your own kind with that mindset, and it did you no good. It got you nowhere. And then going to a place where it was nothing but predominantly people that didn't look like you, and having that same mindset of treat everyone equal, treat everyone with love, treat everyone with respect, that didn't get you anywhere. Didn't get you far, didn't help you much, simply because of what you were in the middle of. Does that make sense? The psychology that you were dealing with, you didn't even understand it yet from a kid's standpoint, a kid's mind. You had no idea what you were up against. You had no idea what you were stepping into. All you knew was be nice to everyone, respect everyone, show everyone love, and go out there and be good on the basketball court. That's all you knew. That's all you were thinking about as a kid. The first organized team I played on, upstate New York, the first organized team I played on in a little rec league, a little elementary rec league. I think it was 10-year-olds and up, fifth graders. Thank God for that team. Um, thank God for the man coaching that team. You know, when my parents split, it was a very hard, uncertain, I guess you can say insecure moment in time, not knowing what your living situation is going to be like, not knowing what your schooling situation is going to be like, you know, being the man of the house at such a young age, and, having nothing but your sisters and your mom, you know, at the home front, having a coach was the next best thing to having a father figure. And that team was the best thing for me at the time, as far as stress management, being able to cope, being able to adjust, being able to adapt to this new environment of nothing but white people. And in this new environment, I was being looked at and being viewed in a way that I had no idea of. You know, um, little black kid, good at basketball. He has to be a thug. He has to be juvenile. He has to be a hoodlum. He has to, something has to be wrong with him, or there has to be some type of deficiency or some type of deficit, some type of dysfunctional ailment that is going to eventually prevent him from being a good student athlete. You know, this is the perception and this is the mindset that most have towards young black boys and young black kids, um, just because of the psychology that was already there and embedded and engraved in so many's minds about the generalization and stereotypical perceptions of black people in general. So that year of playing my first year of organized basketball, that was the year everyone and everything saw who I was with that ball in my hands. That was the year everyone saw my ability, my potential, and what I was capable of doing on that court. You know, the other parents couldn't believe it and shit. I remember there was times where parents would be disheartened because they would see me show up. You know, I might have been late to a game or something one night, and I'd walk through those doors, man, and I'd see my team already warming up and the other team already warming up, and I would literally see the faces of the other parents of the other team's parents when I came through that door, and they seen that I did, you know, eventually show up to play. Not only because I was good, you know, but it was just like, oh man, it's the good black kid. It wasn't just the good kid that was good at basketball. It was the good black kid that was good at basketball. Going from rec league and then eventually, you know, going from fifth grade into the middle school, um, going from playing rec league to playing organized, um, modified in AAU ball. You know, sixth grade is no modified yet, so you know you had to play AAU. So going and playing for AAU in an environment where it was pretty much you know the same situation. You know, you're the minority. You're, you know, surrounded by predominantly people that don't look like you and don't typically care too much for you. Um, that's when I got, you know, I started meeting more people, making more friends, quote unquote. But it was mainly just, you know, your teammates and, you know, people you played sports with that you were around most and whose house you went to and slept or had sleepovers with, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But it was then where I really started to realize and understand what racism was all about. You know, having people you so-called called friend and people you so-called called a teammate and people you whose house you would sleep over. You know, you would meet their parents and it's like, you know, you would hear them, you know, just make the most from racial comment or racial slur or racial joke or whatever it may have been, and you could just never understand why as a kid. You know, you just could just never understand like wow, like where did that come from, or why did that have to be said, or why was that even on your mind? Like why were you even thinking that? And simply because I was there, simply because I was around, simply because there was a black kid around in an area and in a place where there was no other black kids or black people to familiarize themselves with. So all they had was the TV and the news and the movies and the music. Um, so there was, like I said, already this automatic perception of who you are and who you can be or have the potential to be that's not considered good. And that definitely bled over and took effect to actually being on the court, actually playing. There was my seventh grade year. We won the council conference. Like we were the council champs of the conference. We had a really good team my seventh grade year. Eighth grade year, not only did they split the teams up, but they brought in a whole new guy, a whole new coach that wasn't even familiar and didn't even know the players, and definitely had some type of racial tension and feelings toward black people. Um, and he would literally bench me, and it's like it didn't make no sense to me. And even some of the parents was just so baffled and just couldn't understand, like, why are they benching arguably the best player on the team? You know what I'm saying? It's like, and this was my eighth grade year, and after having such a great year prior, prior 2 years of AAU, and then a great year modified. It's like, why would you be benching one of your best players his eighth grade year before high school? So after that, I knew I had to leave. Even at that 14-year-old mind, I knew I had to get out of upstate New York, or I was not going to have the athletic success that I was dreaming of, that I was yearning for, and that I wanted. I simply knew at that time and at that age that racial perceptions and racial tension was going to hold me back and prevent me from making any type of thriving success in the sport of basketball. Being upstate, even as a young kid, that was like my first experience, my first taste of what racial injustices can feel like and can do, not only to your mental and to your psyche, but also to your future and to what it is you're trying to pursue and accomplish. Um, yeah, there was something else upstate, man. I couldn't, even as a kid, like I said, I couldn't fathom why I got the energy and the vibes that I got from everyone and like everyone I would come across, everyone I would deal with. You know, all the white girls were scared of me and shit. You know, it's like they get sense, and this is another thing. It's like I said, I was catching. There was times of my childhood and my upbringing where I was catching it from both sides, not just white people. When we lived around predominantly black people before we moved upstate. When we lived around predominantly more black people, it was the same shit. Like you were getting the same ill will and the same ill intentions from your own kind, if not more. You know, um, so when I moved from upstate New York in the eighth grade and moved down south to Georgia, they held me back. They held me back, and that right there put a stump on my basketball progress, my basketball dreams, my basketball career, whatever you want to call it. It's like that right there held me back in itself. Outside of the culture shock I had, I endured major culture shock, to say the least, when I moved from New York to from the north to the south. Just put it like that. When I went from the north to the south, I suffered major culture shock, to the point where I was ready to walk back to New York. It's like just when I thought it was bad where I was at, um, I moved down south and got my feelings hurt. Let's just say that. Um, Moving down south was definitely a transitional time. It was definitely a life changing time. Being introduced to a different part of the country that you're not familiar with, you just only hear about it in the movies, you just only hear about it, in history, sports, whatever it's related to. But one thing you knew for sure about the South is that's where the racism thrived at. That's where slavery thrived at. That's where lynchings thrived at. Those are the three things you knew for sure coming down south, even as a kid, even as a 14-year-old teenager. It's like those are the three things you knew for sure. Um, you know, so it was like coming down here, getting held back, having to repeat the eighth grade. It was a lot. So I ended up having to go homeschool for the majority of the year, my eighth grade year, the second time. And once I got through the pains and aches and pains of that, I eventually was able to start high school the very next year. So when I got to high school in Georgia, it was such an eye opener to how dysfunctional my own kind is, my own people. Um, it was such an eye opener to the turmoil that we exist in and coexist in. Um, Meeting guys that are from different parts of up north, different cities: Detroit, Chicago, New York, Philly, Baltimore. I mean, you name it. These guys was migrating down here, down to the south with their families, and it was like a crazy. It was like a terrible mix of foreigners, northerners, and southern country people, all in one melting pot. It was just that's what Georgia struck me as when I got here, and it was, like I said, definitely an eye opener. So, with that being said, coming into high school in the South in Georgia, it was an interesting experience to say the least. But as far as basketball, they didn't let me play. Okay, so when I first got to Georgia and I had to do the eighth grade again, they didn't let me play that year either. They told me I was ineligible for being held back, something like that. And then the next year, my ninth grade year in high school, they told me I was ineligible because I didn't attend enough school days the prior year because I was homeschooled. I was doing homeschool. A teacher would just come to the house, or a tutor rather. And so boom, that's 2 years wasted right there already. That's 2 years wasted. No AAU ball, no organized ball, nothing. Uh, just sitting around doing school pretty much. So boom, the next year rolls around, my 10th grade year of high school in Georgia. And by this time, I'm meeting all different kind of people. By this time, I'm coming across all different kind of people. Um, just no one that I should have been around, no one that I care to be around to this day, no one that I should have even been interacting with, associating with, none of that. And because of that, I wasn't focused. I had a lot of distractions my ninth grade year on top of trying to adjust and become acquainted with being in the rhythm of school again and being in the rhythm of interacting with people again. Um, the amount of envy and jealousy and hate I was receiving from other black boys and teenagers my first 2 years of high school in Georgia was almost unbearable. I no longer had issues with white people. I barely was even seeing white people. I barely was even coming around white people. The only time you ran into racism with white people was when you was dealing with some type of administration or something like that. But outside of that, all my issues were stemming straight from other blacks. And what made it even worse, it was other blacks who were also from up north, which was blowing my mind. It was just crazy. So, with that being said, when it came to playing ball and being on the court, those same tensions, feelings, emotions, jealousy, and envious feelings carried over onto the court. And it's like you had the Southerners hating on you because you was from New York. Then you had the New Yorkers hating on you because you was from a different part of New York than they was from. It was like it's fucking ridiculous. And that's why I said in the beginning of this video, I had to understand the psychology of what the heck is going on with black people and white people to be able to understand and speak about this and talk about what it was that was happening and going on. Okay, um, that that right there in a nutshell gives you a glimpse of the mindset and the logic of most blacks in the black community, in the ghettos, in the slums. It's like this is the logic, this is the dysfunction that is holding so many of us down and back as a community, and disabling us and handicapping us from being able to elevate, progress, unify, and come together and do anything. It's just the mindset that is has so many brothers and sisters like in a noose, that it's like when someone different from them, someone who's doing better than them, someone who has just more peace, someone who is happier, someone who's just simply has a different mindset than them. It's like there's no coexisting with that. It's like it's oil and water. Just so many brothers in this in shit. This is why. This is why. But anyway, I was ineligible for the first half of the season. My 10th grade year in high school in Georgia, I was ineligible. Grades and attendance. I missed too many days the prior year. Such is life. Such is life. You know, when when there's other things at hand like racism or like keeping black boys down or keeping black boys from being able to thrive and achieve what it is that they have in their hearts and in their minds, there's always going to be little technicalities to do that, and that's going to be in place to keep you at the bottom, you know. But this is why you can't set yourself up and make it easy for them. You get what I'm saying? It's like I made it easy for them because I missed too many days of school the prior year, my ninth grade year. But that also had a lot to do with me trying to adjust and trying to coexist in such a stressful new environment that was so unfamiliar to me, and someone like me who just did not have the mindset and the heart that so many others did at the time. It was just not mixing, it was just not a good mix, and it was very, very hard for me to find genuine people to be around. uh it seemed like the only people I really got along with was the Mexicans, Spanish people. One of my best friends to this day I met in my neighborhood in Georgia is Mexican, and it seemed like those were the only people that I really was able to coexist with, get along with, and just be myself with without worrying about having to keep this guard up because you know what I'm saying, because I don't know who the heck is hating on me or feel some type of way about me just because it's me, you know. Um, the fact that so many chicks were crushing on me and talking about me and had, of course, it was just like that wasn't helping, and these guys that knew that, it's like it just didn't add to the cause. And it's like I'm only bringing this up and speaking about this because it's like the same thing I have dealt with at every part and phase of my life, all the way up through the army, all the way up until now. So back to the basketball. um I was ineligible for the first half of the season, my 10th grade year of high school in Georgia. When I did come in my sophomore year for that second half of the season, it was almost like the coach, my teammates, parents. It's like they couldn't believe their eyes. They couldn't believe who I was on that court. They couldn't believe the way I could play and how well I was playing. It was just almost like, wow, who is this guy? Like, where'd he come from? That didn't help. Let's just say that didn't help with uh, the perception and the evil eye and the energy that I was getting from teammates and peers and people around. It's like that didn't help at all. Boom. Thank God we leave and move from the state of Georgia. If we would have stayed in Georgia, I was transferring. I was going to transfer. I was going to go to a different high school. I was going to go to a better high school, sports wise and academic wise. Um, no question, hands down, a high school that was cross town, closer to where I lived even. Um, it was there was no way I was going to come back to that same high school the next year if we had stayed in the state of Georgia. Moving from Georgia to North Carolina, let me tell you something. I thought Georgia was bad when it comes to the dysfunction and turmoil that black people are in, and the logic and the mindset that black people have. I thought Georgia was bad. Let me tell you something. North Carolina opened my eyes so widely, and it's so unfortunate and so sad that I had to come to this realization. North Carolina opened my eyes so largely to how messed up black people are overall in the United States and the effects that slavery, Jim Crow, lynchings, black codes, segregation. When you go to the state of North Carolina, there is parts of the state of North Carolina that will literally show you the remnants of slavery and the effect that it had on black people to this very day. I I can't emphasize enough, and I can't put it in words enough. What is like what I saw as just simply wrong, and what is going on in that state. Look, man, I can't. But getting back to basketball, I mean, this ties into basketball. This ties into basketball because it shows you how many black boys are getting pushed through school for the sole purpose just for sports, just for winning, just for the legend and for the honor of whatever white coach is at the head of the freaking helm. It's like this is such a messed up thing that's not being talked about and doesn't get talked about. But these boys are getting from middle school on through college, and you wonder why they get to the pros and they don't know nothing. They getting themselves in all kind of trouble with the law. They getting in all kind of trouble with women, drugs, guns, you name it. Some are even dying, killing themselves in accidents, and it's like going bankrupt. It's like it's no wonder there's just no logic and sense there because these boys aren't learning nothing. They're not being taught nothing because they're just simply being used for sports and winning, and it's like an actual pawn game. It's actually the actual pawns early on. Not it's like at the professional athletes just aren't the only pawns. It's starting from middle school with black boys. They're not being educated. They're not passing tests. They're not learning how to read, write, do math. None of that. They're just being used for the field and for the court. I got my dose of that and my every insight you can imagine with that as soon as I stepped foot in North Carolina. Oh my gosh. So here we go again. I get to North Carolina and I'm about to start my junior year. Coming into this state, coming to this school, I had no idea of who anyone was. I had no idea of who was who, what was what. It wasn't until I started going to the football practice and seeing what was really going on And the only reason I was blinded by it at the time is because we had a really good football program. We were undefeated. We were about to go to the playoffs. All of that. Um, I when I first moved, I tried to join the football team, but of course they told me I was ineligible. Transferring, going from Georgia to North Carolina, and whatever reason they tried to pull, whatever technicality they used at the time, I wasn't eligible, so I wasn't able to play on the football team that year, and I had to wait half the year of the basketball season to come back. Now, the basketball team had arguably, at this time, my junior year, the basketball team had arguably one of the best players in the country. Um, Rising star, same year as me, junior. And then we had a bunch of other guys that were, very solid players who did not come back my senior year. So going into the junior year, I'm new to all of this as far as how good we were. I had no idea how good we were and the caliber of players we had coming into this school. And I remember coming in, and I remember people. I remember there was rumors going around that, oh man, the new guy's talking about me. The new guy's going to take so and so's spot. Blah 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 blah. You know what I'm saying? Talking about the best player on the team. And I remember then, like, welcome to North Carolina, because at this time I didn't even know no one. I didn't even like meet anyone yet. There was days I was literally sitting at the lunch table at lunchtime by myself, like, and I didn't really care, and it didn't bother me because I seen something wasn't right. You know what I'm saying? Something just was really really off and weird about everything when we moved to North Carolina. It was just something very very off and very very different. And I'm gonna tell you why when we get to that point. But it was a very weird adjustment, and it wasn't until I actually got on the team that I started to, I guess you can say, adjust a little more, meet people, uh, make friends, whatever. But it wasn't until I actually started playing that things started to get weird once again. It's like it's like people, they like you as long as you're not doing better than them. They like you as long as you're not getting more attention than them. They like you, they'll deal with you as long as you're not a threat to who and what they are, or who and what they want someone else to be. With that being said, it's like that junior year, everyone knew what I was coming with the next year. That junior year, everyone knew what I was going to be bringing to that team the next year, my senior year. Everyone knew. The only unfortunate part about that is we lost two solid players to transfer my senior year. It could have been a blessing in disguise because it opened up the door for me more. But at the same time, I would have rather those guys come back just so we could have dominated the next year. The people that we got in transfers and new people, it was almost a freaking screaming disaster. It was almost a screaming disaster. Um, and I should have transferred. I want to back up and say that I should have transferred. I should have transferred, and I should have came back completely torching, completely just going off. on that school and the people playing for that school. My senior year, uh, I played football. My senior year, we lost in the third round to Dudley, across town school. Same team, same school we lost to the year prior in the third round of the playoffs of football, but lost them again the next year. There was three basketball players, including myself, on the football team, waiting to go to the basketball, waiting to cross over and go start the basketball season. We had, of course, lost the first two games because we didn't have a couple players, and I was really bothered by that. I hated that the season had to start without us, and we weren't able to, play and start until the football season was over. The night we lost in football in the third round of the playoffs, cold night, November, the night we lost, I was in the gym that night. I lived in an apartment complex at the time, and we had like this little gym that we had access to. All we had to do was take a card or whatever. And I went into like the little uh, racquetball area where the floor is wood, and I took my ball, man. And that same night, we got put out the playoffs. That same night, I was in the gym dribbling. The very next morning, I was at practice. Now, these are things that go unseen and don't get spoke of, and I never told anybody until now. I was in the gym the very next morning at practice, the only football player to show up. I was in practice the very next morning to lead. We had a pretty good year that year. Um, we went to the third round of the state 4A playoffs. That's the furthest the school has ever been. Um, we won our conference. We lost a conference championship game because I couldn't get on accord with my 5'3" point guard who panicked under pressure, never could find the open man, and turned the ball over religiously. And mind you, the point guard that we lost to a private school who transferred, there was like no comparison. It was really hard to coexist with our new point guard for so many different reasons. Ego, pride, and shoot first mentality was a cancer. And then on top of that, not being able to defend anyone, being a liability on defense, turning the ball over, not finding the open man. It was just like a combination of things. When I realized the selfishness and the envy towards me, that's when I knew the end of our road was soon. Despite how far we went, even though we went as far as we did and played as well as we did towards the end of the season. Thank God for our senior point guard. Thank God for our senior center. Um, thank God for our senior backups. Without those guys, it would have been hard to really lead that team and be able to do what I did, despite. Um, that was my senior year of high school ball. My senior year of AAU ball, I was completely snipped and robbed with, you know, being benched and having favorites played over me. Uh, when it came to coaching, man, one thing I realized, and this is why, it's like when it came to coaching, as you can see, my whole life, it's like it was something that was holding me back. It was like it was something, and I didn't even get to my college career yet, but it's like you'll see again, and when I get to that part, how it's like it was always something holding me down or holding me back or shackling me from being great and from really being able to open up and deliver what I'm capable of delivering. It's like it was always some type of political or favoritism or just some type of technicality that they would just say or use. But when it comes to sports, man, in today's world, it's nothing is ever going to be straight. Everything is going to be corrupt or unfair to some extent. Um, all the jealousy and envy and emotions that come with it is it's just a added thing to what's already there. To what already exists. My senior year of high school ball, one of our best players, our junior forward, was out half the year with an injury. So that right there was another blow. So on top of already losing, two solid players to transfer, it's like I lost my junior forward to a knee injury for half the year. So it's like I had to step up and lead and produce even more so, multiple positions, carry them to a team to the furthest they've ever been in school history. So it's like for that to not be awarded with an MVP award was just mind-boggling and mind-blowing. And like I said, to give it to a junior, and not only a junior, but a junior who was out half the year, I just don't see how that amounts to the MVP of the team of the year outside of favoritism, outside of politics, outside of some type of manipulation to keep that player from transferring like your other good players did, to keep them happy, keep them home, you know. Yeah, it's interesting, man. You try to be a teammate, you try to be a friend, you try to be everything you can be. Try to be a student, you try to be coachable, try to be humble, try to be modest. But it's like nothing is ever enough when there's other factors that are weighing in and at play, from racism to politics to favoritism to envy to jealousy, whatever it is, you know. Um, simply having a different mindset, a different heart than most guys, a different upbringing, a different environment. It's like sometimes when you would go to your teammates' houses and you would see the kind of environment they lived in, or the kind of parents they had, or the kind of stuff that they were dealing with outside of school, outside of sports, it's like it click. It makes sense on why they were the way they were on the court, or in the locker room, at school, you know. And it'd be no surprise to you why most of these guys are in the position and in predicaments that they are in now. You know, uh, like I said, I had to understand the psychology first. And one thing I really do understand is most people don't change, man. Most people don't do nothing different. And for so many guys, school days was their glory days, or something close to it, and nothing more, and nothing after. It's interesting how, New York, upstate New York, it was the predominantly white. Georgia was a predominantly black, and then North Carolina was like a good mix. So it was like you were really catching it from both sides, man. And like I said, I don't think I've ever met a brother more off anywhere else than I did in North Carolina. And I don't think I've ever met someone more racist outside of this upstate New York. I don't think I endured or experienced more racism anywhere else outside of upstate New York, and I don't think I experienced or witnessed more dysfunction and turmoil from blacks anywhere else outside of North Carolina. And that's facts, man. And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that it was sports that it took to open my eyes to it on so many different levels in so many different ways, because it's like even after school, even outside of school, and even outside of sports, it's like I was catching the same vibes from like everyone that I would come across or meet or deal with. And I've noticed that a lot of black people in North Carolina are very, very confused when it comes to their history and their culture and their background, especially if they came up in an environment where it's predominantly white. It's like they were almost the worst ones to deal with and be around. It was almost ridiculous, man. But like I said, now it's like so much makes sense and so much is understandable now, because I'm learning this, like, just the basic psychology of people in general when it comes to their feelings, their emotions. They're learning just everything, and so many people simply didn't learn nothing. So many people simply came up in a household where they were just really left to fend for their own and raise themselves, really, because their parents were just either not there or just simply not giving any type of direction, attention, or education to these people. And like, here we are. This is why this generation is so fucked up. It's like I don't mean to just get off topic, but it's like it all ties in and it all makes sense because even back then, it's like I could never understand why peers, teammates, people around me, whoever, classmates, I could never understand why no one thought the way I thought or did the things I did as far as not getting in trouble or just simply showing love or just simply just being friendly. Just, you know what I'm saying? Just simply having mutual respect. It was like that was just never the case. Like it was just always some extra added shit. With the whites, it was racial. With the blacks, it was envy and jealousy.